Hi there, so this is a video that's part of a series where we'll be covering and sharing information about reporting progress. So we work with a lot of schools and a number of them will report progress in a number of different ways. And we just wanted to get a collection of videos together just to be able to share those with OTrack users and other people that might be interested in having a look at what other schools are doing. The one that I'm concentrating on in this video is really using what we call a prior attainment mapping grid. So other schools might call that a progress matrix. Now that's just one format of looking at this kind of method of reporting progress. We have other formats that do it, but this is probably the most popular format of a report that will analyse data in this way. And really, this theory for reporting progress is basically comparing where a pupil was at baseline, so at a starting point, and where that pupil is now based on your current teacher assessment, your latest teacher assessment. Now, this type of reporting for progress will work for schools that are using a point-in-time assessment model or a linear-based assessment model. So whichever one you use, this kind of reporting will work for you. It kind of lends itself more to point in time, but it does work for linear-based schools as well. So, whichever one you use in OTrack, have a go at this, running this report, and you'll see this slightly different way of looking at reporting progress. Okay, what it won't do, however, is give any average points. So this method of tracking is not about how many points progress pupils have made. It's not about saying our pupils made expected progress. It's simply about comparing where they were at baseline and where they are now. Okay, if you're an OTrack school, to get to this report, you'd head over to the reports button on the left hand side. I use the bookmarks, so most commonly run reports, the reports that I use most in OTrack, I'll bookmark them so I can jump past all the other reports that are in the reports list, the full reports list, and just go to the reports that directly to the reports that I use most. So the one that I'm going to concentrate on today is the prior attainment mapping grid. Okay, so I'll select that from the bookmarks, and it's going to ask me some questions. So basically, which year group do I want to run the report for? What's the starting point? And what's my current terms assessment? So I'm going to use year 5. I'm going to select the baseline of end of key stage 1. I'm going to come back to the baseline in a moment and explain other things that you can do in there. And then my current term is summer end of term. So in my demo school, I've got assessments in for each term. So I'm going to select the latest one that I've got. Okay, so that's going to run the report. Down the left hand side, as I selected key stage 1 as baseline, it's now grouping pupils together based on what they were at key stage 1. And then across the top, it's grouping pupils together based on my latest teacher assessment. Now in my demo account, I've got 4 codes set. You may have more or less codes, and your codes may differ to mine. But regardless of what you've got, it'll work absolutely fine for you. So my codes are BW for below, WT for working towards, EX for expected, and GD for greater depth. Like I say, if you're a linear-based school or a point-in-time based school, either way, you may have different codes, but the report will work exactly the same for you. It'll work fine. Okay, so down the left-hand side, I've got pupils that were below. All the pupils that were below at the end of key stage 1 are in this row. All pupils that were working towards in this row. All the pupils that were at expected standards, etc. in this row. Across the top, so I've got 3 pupils that were below at key stage 1 and based on my latest teacher assessment are still below now. Okay, and then that works throughout the report. So of my expected standards pupils, I've got all these pupils, so 14 pupils that are still at expected standard. So as of all the expected standard schools, 70% of them are still working at expected standards based on my teacher assessment. However, 5 of them, 25%, are working towards, so they're just falling behind. So I can start to make judgments using the number and percentages and the pupil lists on here to get to report to governors, etc., but also to get maybe focus groups and intervention groups, etc., that need to get together in school to support these pupils that are appearing to be falling behind. Okay, so we use a colour coding system in this report to try and highlight that to you. The colour coding system isn't anything to do with expected progress, etc. Or pupils making better than expected progress or less than expected progress. You can kind of come to that judgment yourself. There's a few different theories for whether you should be using expected progress or not as a term. In this method of tracking, it's not the tracking system's job to tell you whether or not that's correct. That's kind of your professional judgment within school. But we can, as a tracking system, as a piece of software, highlight things to you, and we use the colour coding system to do that. So any pupil that's red, it basically means that they're currently at a lower equivalent code to what they were at baseline. So nowhere in the report will it say they're making less than expected progress, but it will highlight them red to say, maybe have a look at this. Are these, a group of pupils that I need to focus on? Where pupils are yellow, it's saying that they're currently at the same equivalent code to where they were at baseline. And this is a topic that's discussed quite a lot, is that expected progress? And like I say, this report doesn't say that that's expected progress or not, but what it will do is it'll colour code them yellow to say, okay, they're currently the same equivalent code to baseline, but the baseline was below age-related expectations. So maybe, again, it's a group of pupils that you might want to look at to say, with a bit more support, we might be able to get them to standards. So that's what the yellow means. The green is that they're currently at the same equivalent code to baseline, where the baseline was at or above age-related at that given point in time. And then purple pupils are pupils whose current attainment is a higher equivalent code to baseline. And then you get numbers and percentages of the red, yellows, greens and purples there at the bottom. Okay, I mentioned the baseline filter earlier. If I click on that on the left hand side, you've got a number of different things that you can populate in the left hand side of the prior attainment mapping grid. So I've got key stage 1, but you could swap that to early years. For current year 6s, you can swap that to prior attainment groups. You can select a baseline if you baseline into a new academic year, or maybe the end of last year you might want to use down the left hand side to look at comparing progress over this academic year. And then you can select terms within this current year as well if you want to. So that's really adaptable in there, what you can select as your starting point for when you want to analyse progress in this way. Okay, so the colours and the analysis in there, some schools don't want to see that. They don't kind of like colour coding in that way. So you can turn that off. So down the bottom left hand corner here, we've got a colour pupils names, and you can do it by attainment, by gender, etc. But I'm going to select no, I don't want to colour code at all. If I do that, it's just going to hide the analysis that you get at the bottom, and all the pupils' names are now being black. But you'll still get the analysis at the bottom of each of the boxes, so you can make you can report how many and what percentage of pupils are working at what standards based on baseline. I'm going to load the colours back in. I like those colours, but I'm also going to want to pull in some information about how pupils performed in their most recent test as well. So I'm going to hide the score data. So in OTrack you can record and track how pupils are doing in tests, and this report, it just allows you to pull that score in. So next to the pupil's name now, it pulls in the latest score from a test in there for that term that you've got selected. And it just you can just use it as a little bit of extra context for the pupils when you're discussing these prior attainment mapping grids. Okay, so I think that's everything that we wanted to cover. Like I say, I tried to keep it as short as possible. We will be following up this video with a few extra videos when we get a chance. We'll record them and release them, just to share other ways that schools report progress. We wanted to do this one first because it's not the most popular way. Of all the schools that use OTrack, it's not the most popular way, but it's certainly the way that's growing the fastest. So as schools change their method of tracking, this seems to be the one that most people are moving towards, but not the most popular at the minute, but I suspect it will be within the coming months.